Nobody has one to give us, and we're not going to meet a birth mother at that time who we can hook into and say, oh my God, there's the real reason. Somebody was really under a lot of pressure, and so I think there's just so many myths and societal hype about the reasons, and then we have our own internal stuff that we can't get rid of. In a way, I've likened it to, since I was told as a child that my parents were killed in an automobile crash, I've thought about what happens in families where that does happen to one parent, in real families, regular families, where unfortunately one parent dies tragically, and the child will so often feel they're to blame, that God must be mad at them. They must have done something wrong for this to happen, and they must be unloved, or this wouldn't have happened. So this extends outside of adoption, this kind of experience in a way, except for us, we lost our mommies, and so early that consciously we don't know. I think inside we always know. So maybe I have said enough to start you thinking and have some of your own views about this, either how you experienced it or how you've changed your minds about your experience. Does what I say ring any bells? Or?
Yeah, I was just thinking about how I came from a Catholic agency in Brooklyn, and so one of the things I think they told my parents to comfort the situation was that my birth parents were married. And that always bothered me tremendously, because I always thought if I was illegitimate, I could understand it. But that they were married, I thought no family's too poor, no family couldn't take care of a baby, that a mother and father together would have the resources. And so what was told as a way to sort of make me more sellable somehow ended up being something that really bothered me all my life. I mean, that just made it worse. So the things, and it turns out that my mother wasn't married, my birth mother. And they tell many fabrications, of course, but that being one that was very disturbing to me because it didn't make sense logically. It made it worse.
You had your...
My perception of why my birth mother gave me up is I sort of have two perceptions, and it's a little bit complicated. And it's not what I call a Main Street adoptive perception. I believe that my mother gave me because she had no choice. She wanted to keep me. And because my adopted mother told me at an early age I was adopted. And she passed on the information that she had from the agency, which was the usual typical stuff, like my father was a musician and they weren't married, and my mother's first name was Audrey, and my mother started throwing a few of her own things. My adopted mother, they didn't have any money and they couldn't keep me. So that is what I remember, my conscious recollection of why my birth mother gave me up. But also, the history of how I was adopted is complicated a little bit, but it's, first of all, my birth mother fed me for 6 weeks at the adoption agency. She volunteered. She didn't want to get me up, of course. And, so she fed me in the daytime for 6 weeks, and then I was in several homes, I don't know how many yet, because I don't have the records. And I think that I always knew that my adopted mother, who I could never physically bond with, was not my natural mother. And so I think I was like, had sort of like, I was 6 months old when my adopted mother finally got me. So in the first 6 months of my life, I had been in several homes, and each time when I started to get close to an adult that took care of me, of course they took me away again. So thusly I was becoming a abandonment shock. And one of the things that my mother was told, my adopted mother was told by the social worker, was this baby needs a lot of love, he's in bad shape. They meant me. So I never developed a sense of hating my birth, but later I developed, and I have now today, we never let go of it yet. I hate like the agencies that did this. And I don't want to. I need to let go. I'm really angry at them. And I hate the closed adoption system. And I just recently found out that my paternal mother, my paternal grandmother, wanted to keep me. My birth mother wasn't told. You know, so that's kind of makes me angry again. I've been reunited for 9 years with my family, but I could go on and on.
Anybody else have anything they,
As far as my perception of when I was a kid, I always wanted to meet with my birth mother. I always wanted her. I thought she would just knock on the door one day, and I used to just wish that maybe she would just knock on the door, come and get me, or just say hi, or just want to see me, or something to that effect. My birth mother was married, although she was not married to my birth father. So I know what you're saying when you talk about the marriage, and then I was told that they were married, and that they didn't want to keep me because she was a career woman and she really wanted to go pursue a career. And children really, she didn't want any children. She wanted to just pursue a career and blah, blah, blah. So that didn't really sit well with me. I also felt that at the time that this woman was very cold and heartless, that, she wanted her career more than a human being. Like, a human being is more important than a career as far as I could see it. As far as I still see it, actually. But anyway, so I thought she hated me. I really, really thought that she hated me. I really did think I was a bad person. I don't think I sat there and said to myself, I am a bad person. But I don't think I ever felt I could do anything right. I felt ugly. I felt stupid. I just had a lot of problems with my identity, such issues that I just really had a hard time. I pushed people away all the time. I pushed them away. I did it to my parents all the time to see if they'd come back or to see if they'd reject me. I had my relationships. My husband and I are divorced now, but I mean, I did this in my relationship. And I just carried these patterns of push people away, push people away, push people away, see if they'll come back, see if they'll come back. Okay, I'll push them away again. How much I could put somebody through to see whether they reject me or not. But all those little fantasies, I mean, I had a million fantasies of what my birth mother was like. I never really cared too much about my father for some reason, just mainly my mother. And what she was thinking, what she was doing when my birthday would roll around, it was like, oh, I wonder if she's thinking of me now. Different times in my life when I had a child, was very strong and wanting to meet her and more so. But I did have a lot, and until I met a birth mother, and it wasn't until this year at a support group, I had no idea what birth mothers were like. And I was scared of them. I was afraid of them. I don't know. I guess I looked at them, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but as floozies, I guess. That's the idea I had in my head, that this woman was like wanton and free, and she would just go out and do whatever she wanted to do with nothing about caring about what happened in the interim, and afterwards. And after I met a couple of birth mothers, and I said, well, is this an adopt? I was going to adoption meetings. I don't know if I can handle having a birth mother there. I think I have too much anger or whatever. And then I met some of the birth mothers, and it was the best experience that I ever had, because I saw such similarities and I learned so much. But I was so fearful. And my parents were very secretive. They never told me my name. I know my name now. I searched for, I found out my mother's name, and I know my name. But my adopted parents would never tell me my name. And they gave me, little bits and pieces. But from my aunt, I got the accident, and I got the whole trip, the chosen baby trip. And you're really special, and you're really lucky. And aren't you really lucky to have such wonderful parents that would give you everything in the world? And my parents did. They were financially able to just give me everything, shower me with whatever. But I lacked so many other things, and I was so insecure. And but I was a lucky kid, and it wasn't I special. And And boy, I should really be grateful that they took me off the street and I didn't end up in some home for the rest of my life. You know, I could have been in some home. But here I was in this happy, wonderful family. Isn't everybody happy? Isn't everything wonderful? And no, there's no problem with adoption. I don't have any problem with it at all. I was a lunatic as a child, a lunatic. I had big-time problems, when I went through high school and stuff. They brought me to a psychiatrist, and of course, you know, I wasn't going to school, and I was the bad adoptee. So they took me to a psychiatrist, and he was like, well, you know, your mother tells me that you're adopted. Yeah. Doesn't really bother me though. And then he started to say things to me like, well, do you do this when you're in this situation? And I was like, yeah. And he was just naming all the things that I would do when I lost people, when I was in relationships and stuff like that. So I kind of realized that, yeah, this did play a big part, important part for me. And I brought home every dog with one leg, one eye. Kids, kitties, you name it, I took them home. If they had a problem, boy, I was right there. You know, the kid in the back of the room that nobody talked to, I was their friend. And, you know, I did all this kind of thing. And so I did realize that, luckily, when I was about 50 years old, that I did have a problem with adoption. And I really should have some counseling because I wasn't doing too well as a human being on the outset. And but I had all those ideas, you know, on a lot of them. So.
By being here today, you're doing for yourself. Do you have any problem today doing things for yourself?
No. Well, yes. I mean, I can't say totally, but I still have to look at my priorities. Where are my priorities?
So you're able to look at you today, in the present, not just
Focus on myself.
one-legged animals and other people and things.
Yeah, because I got destroyed.
You're able to help yourself.
Now, yeah.
Anybody else?
I'm sorry, I came in late. What's the
Well, it's on why my mommy didn't keep me,
book?
or why did she give me up, depending on which
What I find
side of the.
interesting in that realm, and I did this back in New York many years ago with a group of adoptees, was to compare, depending upon what, obviously, what phase of search we were in, but to compare the fantasies we had about why we weren't kept with what the reality turned out to be. And in almost every case, they were very, very different.
For sure.
That's exactly what I was going to say. When I was younger, I was the only adopted child out of a total of 5 children. And I was told when I was 3 years old that I was adopted. And my mom was great about it. I mean, I have to give her a lot of credit. She was very open and very supportive and everything. And she used to always talk to me. But she used to always, like, give my birth mother this image of this, like, woman that I should feel really bad for because she had to do this and she didn't really want to. And she had, till this day, she still believes that the adoption agency told her this, and I think they probably did. My birth mother was originally from France, and so they told her that she was a Parisian model. And she goes, I know I did not, like, make that up. She goes, they had told me that. And so she told me this, and she was like, you know, and but then she got married and she came to America, and, you know, her husband wasn't a very nice person, and then, you know, so she had an affair, and an affair means that you go with someone other than who you're married with, and and so she had you, and she really wanted to keep you, but she couldn't. So I always had these visions of this beautiful woman who was like, you know, this model, and, you know, but then she wasn't a model anymore, so she was so sad because not only did people not think she was beautiful anymore, but she had to give up her baby, and oh my God, you know. And I used to feel really bad, and I used to really, like, feel bad. But then as I got older, I, like, was really close with my mom, so then I was like, well, you know, I don't really care about this other lady. And my adoptive father, he was really abusive to my mother and to my brothers, and verbally more so to myself and my sister. So we weren't close to him. So I always, like, wondered more about my birth father, but I really didn't have any fantasy about him. I kept having fantasies about this birth father, and then be like, but I don't care about her because I have my mom, and, you know, she's great, so who cares? And when I was about 16 years old, it really hit me that, like, wow, yeah, I, like, really am having some issue about, like, thinking about this woman a lot, and, like, kind of not really being conscious that I'm thinking about her all the time. And I'd go to the circus and see the pretty women on the elephants going, oh my God, maybe that's what she does now. She rides elephants, you know. I mean, just anything. And but I always, like, really felt bad for her. And so when I turned 20, I had really decided that I wanted to search, and, like, really much to my surprise, I thought this was going to come right out of left field for my mom. And I sat down with her and I was like, you know, I really have something to tell you, and I don't know how to tell you. And I went to say it, and I just started crying, because, oh my God, I'm going to hurt her, you know, she's not going to, like, she's going to be, like, drop dead surprised, you know. And she looked at me, she goes, so you ready to search? And I'm like, wait a minute, I know mother intuition and everything, but like, where did you get that? And she's like, you've been talking about it since you were 3 years old, you know, and that you really always wondered about this woman. She's like, I knew the day would come, and it's okay, you know, we'll do this. And we searched for 2 years. I mean, there were definitely times in that 2 years that I was just like, this is stupid, why am I doing this, you know? And I finally found, and the woman that I met the first time I met my birth mother was everything I could hope for. I mean, she was very warm. We met at in a hotel lobby, and she walked into the hotel. 4 women walked in front of her. I didn't know what she looked like. She just like kind of gave me this description. She said she had red hair and light skin, and so I'm thinking Bozo the Clown red. 4 women walk in front of her, and I'm going, that's not her, that's not her. And like subconsciously I'm going like, how do you know, you know? And finally she walked through the door, and she did not have red hair. She had like strawberry blonde, but it wasn't what I was looking for. But I knew it was her. And I stood up and I'm going, oh my God, I probably just made an ass out of myself. This probably isn't her. And this woman's like, what is this? You know? But it was her, luckily. And she knew it was me from a picture I had sent to her. And she walked over to me, and I'm thinking, like, walking over them, like, should I hug her? No, maybe I shouldn't. Yeah, I will. Oh, I searched for her for 2 years. I'm going to hug her, the hell with it. So, and it was really nice because we hugged each other, like, at the same time. And she's everything I wanted her to be. She was really open, and she, like, thanked me a million times for searching for her. And she cried, and she was so happy, and we talked, and like, we just had this, like, 4-hour conversation about everything and anything. And I left her, and I was, like, really afraid to leave her because I was like, what if, you know, something happens and I'll never see her again. So we wrote back and forth letters and everything, and I was a product of an affair she had had on her husband, and she was still married to her husband, and so I was really fearful of that, like, what would he think? And I met him that first day, too, at the end of our meeting. She brought him in, and he was really nice, and he was like, you know, I'm really glad that you're in our life because she wasn't able to have children after me. So he was like really kind of like, you know, I'm glad that you're in our life now. And I was really immature then, and now I'm more mature. And so I was like, wow, this is great. I mean, what more could I ask for? 2 months after that, our relationship got really weird. Like, she just kind of like started talking really superficial instead of being like, you know, instead of intense conversations, more like how's the weather? That's good, you know, fine. And so I went to see her with my mom too, so they could meet in person because they had written and talked over the phone. And we went there, and it was really tense. It was like so tense. She was very cordial, very nice, but I could just sense there was something very wrong, and it wasn't because my adoptive mother was there. It was like something else. And so when I got home, I talked it over with my mom. She's like, yeah, I sensed it too. And she goes, I really didn't sense it personally. She goes, I really just, like, the minute I walked in that house, I sensed something was wrong. So I wrote her this long letter asking her if she could tell me what was the matter. And in response, she wrote me a letter that kind of said goodbye, but not really. And so then I, you know, being the jerk that I am, I was just like, well, she didn't really mean goodbye, so I'll get in touch with her again. So in February, I sent her a birthday present, and she didn't respond to that. So then 2 months ago, I wrote her this like 3-page letter asking her like what happened, what was going on. I was totally confused. And her lawyer sent me a letter telling me not to contact her anymore. And it really just blew my mind because I couldn't understand like how she went from like so open to so close. And first of all, like, she totally blew the image I had of her for 20 years. And I was 21 when I met her, so it was like 21 years I had this fabulous image, and she like took that away, and then like she took away the one important thing that I always had for security. And I told her this in the letter. I was like, when I was little, I always held on to the fact that she had given me away because she loved me, and you know, just things weren't, you know, she did it for me. And then all of a sudden I'm looking at this woman, and I was like, oh my God, like, you did this for your husband, you did this for yourself, and you've gone on, and now you've left me here holding the bag. And like, I mean, I just feel like I'm never going to get an explanation of why she did this. And so it's really hard, I think the worst part is having your fantasy taken away and having it be totally something different than what you expected.
Do you know what happened? Why she?
I have no idea. She won't tell me.
The relationship.
No, the letter from the lawyer that I just got a couple months ago said it would be wise and advisable for me not to have any further contact with her. I had also asked her to tell me my birth father's name because I had never asked that in respect to her feelings. And the letter said from the lawyer that they thought it would be in my best interest to know who he was.
And wouldn't?
No, it wouldn't be in my best interest or that of hers. Like, everything that wasn't in my best interest also wasn't in her best interest. So I think you could have taken my name out of there and just said it wasn't in her best interest. But no, I've yet to get an explanation, and in 3 letters I've tried to get one, but no response.
I can share mine.
Okay, but I would like to keep the focus on our feelings about why our mothers didn't keep us.
I can do that.
Okay, because so we can get really far afield, and I know this is a sensitive area for most of us, but I think if we do focus on it, we can do some good work in here. Go ahead, Dave.
Growing up, I always had, well, I was 14 when I was found, so I didn't have all that growing up to do. But before I met my birth mother, I had an image, or my idea was that she gave me up because she couldn't take care of me. It was her choice to give me up. After I met her, well, this actually has come out through the 10 years I've known her, that it really wasn't her decision, or she feels it wasn't her decision, that her decision was made by the other people in her lives. My birth father, for one, for not stepping forth and saying that he would provide for her and myself, and also her parents, who also said that they weren't willing to support her through this. And it's kind of interesting. So the contrast is, before I thought it was really her decision, and I realize now, in her view, that she had no part in the decision whatsoever. And she feels very bitter to many people in her life dealing with that. So, and she herself has stated that she's somewhat unhappy that she gets along so well with my adoptive mother, because she didn't want to like her either. But in fact, they have a very nice relationship between them, to the point where I can barely talk on the phone now.
They hog it from you, huh?
Yeah.
3, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, whenever there was a workshop, conference was in Boston, and Rollo May spoke about choices. And one of the things that he said really struck me, and it was that whatever point we are in our lives, whatever choices we make, are the only the choices that we make are the only choices that we can make at that point in our lives, given our emotional maturity and our life experience and our support. And effectively, to me, that means I didn't have any choice. And I can think back in my life, and I would guess most people can, of things that they did that they regret somehow. And you did the best you could, and you're sorry that you did it. And when I hear your story, and I mean, I know that sometimes we have our reunions and then they go haywire, and the only thing I can think of is that someone, and it's hard for us not to take it as a rejection, but what's being rejected, I think, is the person being able to deal with their feelings. They're just saying, I can't deal with my feelings, I can't deal with this goddamn pain, so leave me alone. Don't come back, don't come around anymore. That's my belief. I don't know how other people feel about this, and it's not. And adoptees do it to their parents too. Adoptees will go find their birth parents and say, I don't want to deal with you anymore. And what they're really saying is, I can't stand this pain.
It took a phone conversation with you for me to realize how much pain I still had after all these years. And that my life has been very difficult, and at times I felt bad, I felt sad, I felt painful, but I didn't feel overwhelming physical, bodily pain, because it was blocked. It didn't surface. It surfaced in every other way. And you go through life, not knowing. When you're a child, you have a lot of conversations with yourself, and you don't know. Sometimes you're afraid to ask questions, but you need an answer, so you find your own answer. And so often it's a faulty answer because you're a child. You can't comprehend. You can't understand. So I never really knew why my birth mother gave me up. I just had ideas. I just had conversations with myself, and I came up with my own answers. And all that I had to go by was what I received from my adoptive mother when I was 13 to 14 years old. And up until that time, I was a mess in a sense, but I was a very covert mess. Nobody knew. I don't see how today how no one can pick up on it. I was the good adoptee. I was the apple of my mother's eye, and I really was a pretty terrific kid. I wish I was as good an adult as I was a child. I was exceptional, and now I'm very unexceptional. And I did everything that I could, and I tried to achieve, and I tried to excel at everything that I did. And I was good enough looking, and I did well in school, and I was the best athlete. I was the favorite grandchild. So I really, on the surface, you could think I had a pretty good childhood, but I had a miserable childhood. And a lot of that childhood was going on inside my own mind. I didn't know. I didn't have any information. And I didn't know where babies came from. I knew I didn't come from my mother, but I had a mother. I had an adopted mother. I didn't know I had an adopted mother, but I had with someone in a position of being a mother to me. And she was the best mother, I guess, that she was capable of being, but I feel she fell short. And but I didn't know where babies came from, even at 13. I thought I came from the stork because I had seen it on cartoons and things. And
Adopt stork, it's called. Adopt bird or something.
I was given a book in 5th or 6th grade. I was a very good reader called Growing Up. Still to this day, if I read that book, I couldn't read it because of what it had to deal with. I could look at a sperm and an egg and a picture of a little boy and a little penis, but what is looking at a 5-year-old child with a penis tell me about how babies are made? I didn't understand until I got into biology in 10th grade. And I got an A, and I still didn't understand where I came from. I thought I came from a mother's stomach. How did I get out? I still didn't know. So at that age, I went home one day after knowing I didn't come from her, but not knowing where I came from, and not looking like her, and being tired of my classmates saying, how come you don't look like your mother? How come your whole life of being on the street, playing sports on the street, you don't look anything like your brother? He's not your real brother, is he? I asked my mother, was I adopted? She almost choked, She said, yes, Marky. She still calls me Marky. I'm still a little boy. Yes, Marky, you were. I said, okay. That was it. So I had to continue to ask the questions because I was tired of trying to find my own answers. I had every defense mechanism you could find in an abnormal psychology law. She said she felt that there was no need to tell me anything, that I was doing beautifully. I was doing so unbeautifully, that's one of the reasons I was asking. She didn't pick up on that. And she told me all that she knew. And even she was shielded. She knew living to the mouth. She said, I came from a young couple. I don't think they were married. Your mother was Jewish, and your father was Italian. They couldn't afford to keep you. That's all that she knew. So then, I'm still a child. I'm still a child today. I'm an adult. But there's a certain amount of child in me that will never leave. And still, I will always be the child in this relationship.
But what about your perception now that you've had your reunion for a couple of years? What about your perception? I really want to try and stay focused on that piece because we won't get our work done in here. So you've known your mom for 2 years. So then at 34, I find out about a birth mother and where I came from. And I was never able to do anything about it because of my adoptive family and because of answering my own questions. So then suddenly, I received a phone call from her. And we talked like for 3 hours, and I told her everything, and she told me everything. So then I knew. There was a certain goodness about that, a certain identity about that, connectedness, so on and so forth. Then it made me relive my whole life, and it started some other problems. And the whole thing was very novel, very difficult. Everything affects everything. So, it's been difficult. It was like a honeymoon at the beginning with her. The honeymoon is over. And only recently have I been able to look at her in a different light to try to
be very positive and to go on. But she told me why I was giving up. It was the time. She was young. She was 17. She was pregnant, and her family situation wasn't very stable. Her father lived outside of the house, and he gambled, and the mother worked, and they were poor, and they didn't have a rug in their house. And that's important. I'll tell you why in just a minute. And that's what you did then. You didn't have a child out of wedlock. It was the times. And she said, how is she going to raise a baby? What is she going to do? She didn't want to go on welfare. And that was the thing to do. And that's what everyone steered her to do. And she did it. She did the right thing. She kept beating that home to me over the next 12 months. She had no choice, and she did the right thing. And that left me with some pain. Because I didn't understand, because I didn't think that was the right thing. And I tried to understand the other person's point of view. I tried to understand the times. I wasn't during that time. But I know my own experience, my own upbringing, my own perception. And you just don't do that. You just don't do that. If she wanted to keep me, she could have. My mother's very big on choice. Everything in life is you choose to live the life that you choose. Well, she chose to give me up. She didn't choose to keep me. And I needed her to be able to see that. She was only able to see that until very recently.
You know, a young pregnant woman came to see me a couple of months ago. She's 18 or 19, and she's from another country. She's living in New York, and her boyfriend ran away as soon as she found out she was pregnant. And she said, help me find a place to give my baby to somebody. And I said, is that what you want to do? And she said yes. But she was, it took her a long time to say yes. And I said, is that what you want to do? Is that what you feel you have to do? She said, I don't know what else to do. And I said, what kind of choices do you have? And she said, well, actually, if I went back to Holland, my parents would support me and allow me to keep the baby. But I don't want to live with my mother because my mother will mother me. And I said, is that a better choice? Would that be better for you than giving up your baby? She said, well, maybe if that was the only problem. She said, but then I'll lose my apartment in New York. And then I won't be able to get one because I've been living there and my rent will go up. And I said, do you have anybody who could live in the apartment and pay you rent? She said, well, yes. And what we did is we broke it down into little bitty problems. And what she didn't have was anybody to help her take this huge problem and say, I'll be your friend, and you're okay, and you're not a tramp, and let's just see if we can solve some of the problems. And when she started to look at them one at a time, she saw that she could, in fact, very easily keep her child. She had the support from her family. She had friends who would help her do what she needed to do with her apartment to in fact, sublet it and put her things in storage and go to Holland and have her baby and come back. And I think that most of our mothers didn't have anybody to give them that, to give them any kind of support, to be a friend, and let them, with as free a mind as possible when you're scared to death, and I can't imagine being any other way, except scared to death, and what am I going to do? And I know that many of you have heard how browbeaten some of our mothers were by the system in one way or another, either by their parents or by the agency or even by their friends who said, you don't want to do that, you're going to mess up your whole life. Nobody tells them what kind of mess their life is going to be in if they give us up. And I think that from my point of view, we have to be able to accept that our parents, that our birth mothers did what they did when they say they didn't have a choice. We weren't in their shoes. And people can say to me, I shouldn't have done things I did a long time ago, and I can say, well, you're right, maybe I shouldn't have, but it was the best I could do at that time. It's hard, but I think we have to have acceptance of them if we want to have a relationship, that we can't have it any other way. I'm sorry, I can ramble on too. I just get blah.
As an adoptive parent, I don't think social worker, it makes me very, very sad that there's nothing that I could do or say that's going to make it right for my adopted kids. If I give them the story of, well, your mom probably didn't really have a choice and those things, then there's the fantasy that they're going to create about this poor woman who is so bereaved. And that's not so it's like a no-win situation. I could be the most wonderful parent, as and have a great achiever for a child, and somehow not know that this kid is really hurting inside. So I can only do the best that I can do. But in many ways, it's a no-win situation for me and the adopted kid until each of us has worked out.
You know what? I don't agree with you, because I think one of the main things that I experienced, and it related to what you were saying, if my adoptive parents had said to me, this must be hard for you, you have two mothers, you have two fathers, instead of this thing about you should be grateful I was adopted into a dysfunctional family, grateful for all the kinds of difficult things that happened, I basically had a good enough adoptive family, but that is what's really missing, because whenever I brought up the topic to my parents, particularly my mother, there was this superficial, we'll answer any questions you have, we've told you everything we know. The pain in her eyes when I brought up this subject told me, I'm sure when I was 2 or 3 years old, because it was very intuitive, don't bring this up. And whenever I did, I had to really be motivated, because I knew I was going to sort of put her through hell for a while to ask those questions one more time. How many times did I say, Mom, I know you've told me everything, but could I ask you again, is there anything you left out? You've told me this, you told me that. Just, grasping for any little tidbit of information. And in fact, they really were totally honest and told me everything they knew.
But for you, whatever answers maybe weren't right, or for you, being the very special child, or for you, you had a very understanding one, but you still have your pain, whatever it is.
But to acknowledge that there is pain in the adoptive experience would have been so healing for me. Instead, it was, you look like your grandmother, isn't this a great family? We love you even more than your sister, who we had biologically. It's a big fucking lie, is what it is.
But no matter, what I'm saying is no matter how you say it, I've done that with my own son, and empathize and even brought things to his attention that he's not aware of about, like, is this the way you feel, and this could be related to that, and this emptiness. He still has his pain. It's not, I can do the best I can.
But you've done so much. What you have done is so important and so special. But to be truly understood is so wonderful.
But it still hurts me to know that he still hurts.
But that's part of what goes on with adoption, I think. Every one of us has our pains, and we can't change the pain of being given up. We can't change the pain of surrendering, and we can't change the pain of being infertile if we are. I think if the more honest we are, then the less pain we may have, but I don't think you can take it away, and it's sad. I think, by the way, I interpreted what you said in a just a slightly different fashion, in that we, as adoptive parents, if our adoptive parents helped us grieve, acknowledged that we had a loss, that we felt sad, and encouraged us to mourn the loss at an appropriate age, that would be very beneficial for us. And no, I can't take it away. No, it's for life. But your being honest about it with your family is going a long way to make things somewhat better than we had. Those of us who didn't have the honesty. My parents did what she just described. I mentioned adoption one time. My mother went back like this. I never mentioned it again. It was very clear she didn't want to talk about it. And all that did was make me feel worse. And say, God, I really must be a freak. And I'm ungrateful, and on and on and on. So you bury it.
Do you think
Marty,
everyone has to go
one
through
second.
mourning period?
Mark. Let me let Marty
I think
speak and
we
then...
need to understand the context in which our parents adopted us, because it's fine for us to sit here and say that we can do this now, today, but I don't think my adopted parents, most of the people in the room, let's say the 1950s, were the parents, their mission was, to tell the child he or she was adopted, to tell the child what information they had. And in many cases, once they did that, it was like a big sigh of relief. I got that out of the way, it's done. And, parents like my parents, who were wonderful parents, did tell me age-appropriate information as they went along. And did tell me as much as they knew when I wanted to know it. But in fact, it turns out that they didn't have the information about that that I eventually learned myself. But I don't think we can fault them for not doing what we just said. Because I don't think they were aware
Well, you're right.
that we were in pain if we were in pain.
There wasn't any psychological data to show it.
Because they were doing, they were having a family and they were raising a child that they wanted to have. And, they were sold just as we were sold on being special and chosen. They were sold that they were doing wonderful things for a child that needed a home.
Well, and they were told, my parents were told to tell me the story about my birth parents being killed. They were told, they said, this is what you tell a kid, then he won't think about his birth parents. That doesn't work, but that's what, I agree with you, Marty.
Yeah. Let me just share a little bit about my situation, because I think it's very different than some of what I've been hearing. I was told growing up that my birth mother was ill or sick and couldn't take care of me, and that was true, but in a sense it eliminated a lot of the rejection aspects of it for me. I never really felt rejected. I felt like that made sense, that a person who was sick and couldn't take care of an infant really couldn't take care of an infant, and that's why I was where I was. I was adopted through an agency at 9 months old, and my sister was adopted when she was 7 months old, and 7 years later. And we had a very close-knit adoptive family, and we didn't use these labels of adoptive and whatever, mommy and daddy, and we were a family. But when I did my search when I was around 27, it took about 2.5, 3 years to get the information that I needed to complete the search. I unfortunately discovered that my birth mother, and I had been told by the adoption agency that everyone was in good to excellent health, of course, that I figured out for myself when I was about 21 that I had been born in a state mental hospital. And that fact had not been told to my adoptive parents when they adopted me. Because the agency decided that I probably would have been an adoption. Maybe I didn't want anybody to adopt me.
Is it catchy or something?
Well, I figure that's why they kept me in the foster home for 9 months, watching for some form of acting out, whatever they did. But the social worker said, well, Martin, you're a perfect example of nature versus nurture. I mean, look at the environment you were in, and the achievements you've made, blah, blah, blah. Sure, right. But unfortunately, my mother had died many years before I was able to find her. And I did go back to the mental hospital, and I did get records from her. And in fact, having been born there and her staying in there for 3 years after I was born, made it clear to me that, she really couldn't take care of me. Although it's questionable as to what she was in there for. I know I wasn't conceived there. That was my second question. But, it was sad that I wasn't able to meet her, and so, I grieved the loss of not having that, and the woman spoke before about meeting birth parents and support groups. That affected me profoundly, too, because here I was meeting all these wonderful women who were searching for their children, and I wasn't ever going to get to meet my birth mother. And then meeting my half-sister, who was 7 years older than I am, who was raised in foster care, because, again, my mother was not physically and emotionally able to care for her. But nobody in the family, in our birth family, came forward to take her in and, take care of her, because, again, back in the 40s, it's like, if mom was crazy, the daughter might be crazy, and, were you looking for trouble or whatever, So she feels even more abandoned than I do, having been adopted, because she knew these people. And, knew a little bit about our birth mother. And what little information I've been able to get about her becomes very hard, because family members find it so hard to talk about her, because she was, quote-unquote, a difficult person, she had her problems. I don't think of her as being different, but,
Is this your sister who I've met?
Louise, yeah, yeah. And my sister is a birth mother also. And we all were tied in together with the Louise Wise Services in New York. But I think that the truth I was told by my adopted parents, who were fascinated by the story after I was able to tell them, when I found it, the result of the survey, it not being much different. I mean, I realize now that, considering what my sister went through, I was fortunate to be adopted away from that family instead of being raised in foster care or being bounced around from relatives. So I think that's different than, being adopted by a family and being told your family, your parents were killed or they didn't want you or whatever. So a lot of that, I find it a little hard, I understand what you're all saying, but I find it hard to relate that because I don't really feel like I was, rejected per se by her. She really didn't have a choice. One of the 2 babies ever born in that mental hospital, and I did learn some hard facts. That she was given electroshock therapy 9 times during the pregnancy while I was so she went through an awful lot of things. And luckily I did the search and found some medical information that saved me. I think about 4 years ago I was having some problems, physical symptoms, whatever. And, a very insightful doctor, after hearing my story about my mother, figured out that I might have a thyroid problem, and it turns out that I did. And he thinks that that's what he may have had, that went completely, haywire and berserk, and nobody knew about it, and that's what she said.
Thanks, Moy.
I'm so touched by your story because there's just basically, in a nutshell, my birth mother's story is like a hideous 40s movie, and what happened was she became pregnant with me. She came from a very dysfunctional family. Her mother was a severe alcoholic. And it was bad enough she became pregnant with me, but shortly after that she became pregnant with my full-blooded birth sister. And at that point, when she was 5 or 6 months pregnant, her parents checked her into Willowbrook State Hospital for acting out in such an outrageous way. And it's very interesting to me because I'm a psychiatric clinical nurse specialist, and one of my worst fears was finding my birth mother in the back wards of a mental hospital, as some other people have talked about, the worst of fantasies. And when I heard her story and her life, and basically she ended up staying there for 8 or 9 years, although I don't believe she was ever crazy. She certainly isn't now. She's lovely and wonderful, and I think that people got railroaded into mental hospitals. This was in '53. And when I heard how horrible her experience was, and that someone could be incarcerated in a mental hospital for committing the grave sin of a second illegitimate child, it was mind-blowing. And for the first time, this talk about you being grateful, I was grateful. I thought, God, I had a great life compared to what it might have been like, although it ends up she was a far greater victim than I will ever be. And this whole issue of, I mean, whether your mother was misdiagnosed, she had a medical problem, or it's quite likely she had probably, people who acted out or were a little bit, doing things that just weren't done, were shuffled into mental hospitals in the 50s. It's mind-blowing.
Mark?
About a year ago, I found out from my birth mother the rest of the story of why I was given up. And she was going with a man, my father, and he offered to marry her. And she didn't want to get married, and he wasn't Jewish. And so to me, she had a choice of getting married if she wanted to, but she didn't. And then his family, he offered to take me and to raise me, and his mother, a big Italian family, offered to raise the baby. And that's not what she wanted. I feel that was another choice that she had. And I guess abortion would have been a choice. And I think adoption is a choice also. And I think that's what she chose to do. That she did have choices. She tries to press upon me that she had no choices. She could have got married. She could have let the other family raise the baby. See, my whole adoption issue was clouded by the fact that my adoptive parents divorced when I was 1, and I grew up without a father. I knew this from my father until I was about 14. Since passed away, we really never had a relationship. And we had some emotional problems and things, and my brother was supposed to be committed to a state mental institution. And, so it was difficult when I was young, and it makes it more painful from my point of view, that I think she had choices and she chose to do what she did because yes, it was the times, yes, she was young, yes, she was scared, yes, she was frightened, yes, she didn't know about having a baby and about responsibility and everything, but she also had feelings of, she didn't want to ruin the rest of her life. And she since said, yes, I didn't want to ruin the rest of my life. I didn't want to be tied down. I wanted to have a life. I wanted to have fun. I wanted to go on, so on and so forth. I didn't want to be stuck with a baby. That's important for me to hear that from her, to say, I just wanted to get out of the situation. I mean, she thinks I was a married exception. And she tells me I didn't even remember it. I didn't even do anything. I didn't even enjoy it. You know, on the one hand, she refers to me as a love child, her love child, but she had no intercourse. So it just makes it harder for me to digest all of this. And then she told my father that I died in childbirth, so that tied up that story. And then when she signed the papers when I was 3 days old, before that time she had met her future husband, and he had proposed marriage to her, and she accepted. During the same conversation when she accepted the marriage proposal, she said, well, there's something I need to tell you about myself, and when I tell you, you won't ever want to marry me. And that was, I had a child. I had a son. She's putting it in the past tense. It's two days before she signed the papers. The day after, I had a son. Goes, well, that's okay. We'll raise him as our own. She said, no, you can't do that. It's too late. And he's like, are you sure it's not too late? Why is it too late? Fill me in. Is there anything we can do? And she said, no, I signed the papers. I released him. He's relinquished. That's it. Then several months later, she told me she hadn't signed the papers yet. So she had another choice to marry this man, to be accepted by this man, and to still have the child. And then 2 days later, she signed the paper. She never saw me, and she relinquished. So now, after 34 years, having a lifetime to deal and cope with this, she's up until I saw her 2 days ago. We've been doing a lot of talking, so on and so forth. I feel better about things. I feel more comfortable with myself and better able to continue on with the relationship and just try to focus on positive things. But it's been very hard to accept the story from my adoptive family, to accept my adoptive family. They don't accept me. I'm an outcast. I don't have an adoptive family anymore. Outside of my mother. Most of them, they won't even talk to me because I didn't turn out like they thought I would turn out as a child, because I haven't remunerated my adoptive mother, and because I've let my birth mother come into my life, they like I did a bad thing. So I grew up thinking, what's wrong with me? What did I do bad? And I answered my own questions, and there wasn't anyone to entertain my questions. I didn't know, and then when I found out, on the one hand it's nice, on the other hand it raises a whole bunch of other things, and there's a lot of difficulty there to digest everything. And I have 2 children. I'm not married. I'd like to be married, but she doesn't want to get married. I have 2 children, and I have bonding. We're very close because of my personal circumstances. We're very close, and that makes it hard because I get love from my children that I've never received in an adult fashion. we're so close and there's so much bonding that it makes it harder to see how someone can even give up a child under any circumstances.
Does this ring a bell for anybody else? Does anybody?
Oh, I'd just like to say something. I was adopted at 3 1/2, and I have a lot of stuff about that. And I don't have memories. I can't seem to get in touch with that sort of thing. And all I've been able to do is get in touch with, well, what you might call psychic stuff, senses of things. And my sense is that she wanted a child. She had lost either a child or had some problem or wanted to manipulate. So got this, my father to impregnate her. This is all fantasy. This is my fantasy. And that, well, let's see here. And that he was very hard on her. He didn't offer to support her. And that in fact he even have raped her. I don't know that, but I
Is
said,
this still fantasy you're talking?
this is all fantasy. I have not, I'm in the middle. Okay, I have to search. And that, I don't know if this is appropriate, but I feel like I want to say it, just to get it out of me quickly. And that I remember seeing a movie with Sally Fields, and it was about rescuing her kids, and her farm was to be taken away. It was relatively recent, within probably the last 5 or 6 years. And I thought, well, God damn it, if she can do it, why couldn't my mother do it? You know, I was born in 33, so it was a whole different era. But I think that movie was supposed to have been better than that. I do have a sense that when she left me at the adoption home, she turned her back and walked out and said nothing. And what I remember seeing was her back. Now, I have a vague picture of that. I can't tell whether that's real or whether that's fantasy either.
But wasn't that the only way that the agency was able to take over that home? Was that the birth mom actually had to do that? Or had to?
Oh, yeah.
Say that again, because I don't understand what you're.
So
The
she
jet
had-
engine got me too, so I'm not.
No, but maybe she was advised to do that. That was the only way that the agency would help, or the only way they could place children, or, you know, it could never be with the assistance of the birth mom. It had to be only under the terms of events. Like,
It depends on the state, I think, but I'm. You know, Marty? I mean, you're.
She could have been, there's all kinds of possibilities.
Oh, sure.
She could have been a widow, she could have been a single person, unable to take care of you, there could be more symptoms involved, I'm not sure. Unable to take care of you for any number of reasons. She could have died, or she could have, stayed in the hospital, whatever you imagine it to be. You might, have you talked to any hypnotherapist to try to address or do some of these things? Because at that age, I've talked to people that are doing my situation between 0 and 9 months, and there's some people who think that they could probably more than me do that in a number of sessions. Certainly a 2, 3-year-old or even 1-year-old, so they could probably work with you. You know, if you were with your mother or the siblings, you know, they probably.
Yeah, that's a question. Where was I?
Yeah.
The only other thing I can say about it is that my adopted mother said, oh, you used to call somebody Aunt Sue. Well, my mother's name was Suzanne. So it does sound like she did not pose as mother, but as
She
a
told
mother.
you,
Yeah, it's possible that I could do that. I haven't done that yet.
I wanted to respond to what this fellow, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Mark.
Mark?
we met in New York.
That's right, yeah. You know, we talk about healing and forgiveness with one another, you know, on their part, and we have our grieving and our losses to work through. You have, you know, and I have, and other people here too, we have the hard data now, you know, we know what the story is. You talk about the choices and options your mother had. You know, there's a lot of what ifs, and I could have been this, and I could have been that, and I could have gone here, and I could have gone there. But in fact, things went just the way they went. And, nothing we can say or do about it is going to change that. And it's obviously shaped your life. And, it's like the Lady and the Tiger story we all read in elementary school. Door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3, and these are the possibilities. It's easy for me to sit back and say, well, things could have been just as tough if she kept you and, gone on with, her life. And, you'd be maybe not sitting here now, you'd be doing something else. But the fact is that I think somehow or other you need to find it in your heart to accept her and maybe even forgive her and work through the sense of, Mom, why didn't you do this? I mean, even with our adopted parents, or, our moms and dads or whoever they are, and other people in our lives, they disappoint us in some way, they don't own up. And, as you mature and grow up, you look back and you think, well, gee, my father and I could have been better buddies, or how come I never told somebody I loved them, or how could I have blown that relationship, or whatever, But here you have the opportunity now, today, to have some part of sharing a relationship with her on any terms that you and she want.
I think you said that really well, and I also think of something that you said about your parents were good enough. And if we're lucky enough to have good enough parenting, we're way ahead of the game in some respects, because some people don't even get good enough parenting in this world. The adoptees or non-adoptees, it doesn't matter.
I mean, if we had the answers to the questions you raised,
We wouldn't need to be here.
But
we are here, and you're right. We're here, and now it's what do we do from now on? We can stay angry, or
or you can focus that anger and grow with it, or you can try to change it for other people, which is why we're here, obviously. So that history doesn't repeat itself.
Ann?
I think that another perspective or thing that I had was, I always felt like if my birth mother had kept me, I wouldn't hurt so much in my life, okay? But I also realized that through the hurt or the pain that I feel, trying not to blame anybody, because I have to take responsibility for my own life and how I think and how I feel. And sometimes, if I place the focus on somebody else, then I lose a little bit of myself, but that sometimes our greatest enemies are not even enemies. People that come into our lives are really our greatest teachers. And I find that having gone through whatever I've gone through in my life, and I've picked many of the wrong people to be involved with in relationships and things like that, that I never would have learned and grown to the capacity that I can say today that I'm a happy person. I didn't like the way my life turned out, maybe in some aspects, but that I'm much stronger, and I have a lot more than I see other people may have, or I've gone through a lot of issues or a lot of feelings, and I have compassion, well, I try to anyway, for other people. And it's just, it can be, I can either look at it as a tragedy, anything in my life, I'm not talking about the situation, or I can look at it as a new opportunity to grow, and to become more human. And it really, doing my search for my birth mother has been a really healing thing for me. And my perspective has changed on every single issue in my life.
There's a story that I remember about a very rich German industrialist who he and his wife had a son, and from the moment the son was born, they put the son in a plastic bubble, and they gave him special foods, and he had special air, and he only had special books to read, and he had round-the-clock nursing and doctor's care. They wanted to protect him so that he wouldn't get ill and he wouldn't have any problems. And when he was 21 for his birthday present, they let him out. Within 24 hours, he died of excitement. And if anybody grows up without any adversity, with a perfect life, without any problems, they never skin their knee, they never have a decision to make, they never do anything wrong, they never cry, they're never sad, they can't survive in this world. And we are here, and we here are the strong ones. We're here, we're in this room. And we can use the adversity that we've had as strength as you said, I really truly believe that we can take all our energy and our anger and our pains and focus it and help other people. It's really powerful if we can get the acceptance and just accept, I'm here. It's too fucking bad. It's sad we started our lives the way we did. But we have a right to be angry about that, perhaps. But it's what we do with it. And we can really do good, powerful stuff if we look at it from that point of view. There's a part of me that would rather have had it happen some other way. I think, well, nope, if I live with my birth mother, nothing could be any worse than the pain I had. So, you could go back and take my chances, but I can't go back. I went through one of those 3 doors, and the doors closed behind me. So it's what we do, from now on. And if we work to make it better for our brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers out there, we gain from that, we get strength from that, and we feel good. And I think it's really healing.
I think that's definitely true. I know, like with myself, my search also helped me grow a lot and change a lot, which really surprised me. I had joined a support group in the beginning of my group, and I'm still with that support group. And I find now 2 things that my search helped me realize. One, when I was younger and growing up, and I don't know how I didn't make this connection, but I always figured, because my adopted father was so bad, I always figured, well, gee, if I wasn't placed here, then, I probably would have had this really excellent father or whatever. And when I found my birth mother, one of the things that really bothered me at first, which was really immature and kind of really disconnected, but she had told me that my birth father had wanted to marry her and that he was in love with her and everything, but she chose to stay with her husband and stuff. And I was so mad at her, and I can understand what you were saying about choices, because you mean you had a choice and you blew it, and I was like, whoa. And then all of a sudden, I was really angry, and all of a sudden it dawned on me, yeah, but if I had this excellent father, I wouldn't have this great adoptive mom that I had, because she wouldn't have been with him. I would have been with my birth mother, And then it kind of was like, wow. And at first I was really angry, and my changes all come about within the last month and a half, but I was really angry, and I was just I can't believe I did all this in vain and everything else. And then it kind of clicked. I kind of said to myself, I can feel sorry that this happened, that I spent 2 years searching, and I can be mad at the whole world and everything else, or I can look at what I decided to do. I decided to search, and that meant good, bad, or indifferent. I was going to search, and I realized that it's true. It's better to know than to never know, and have all these fantasies and questions. And so I kind of took that anger and just focused it to give me energy, to help other people, and that healed me so much. Before I came here, about 3 days before I came here, one of the girls in my group, she was searching, and I had given her a tip to go talk to the lawyer who had handled her adoption, and she did, and she found. And I was just wow, and it made me feel so good that I had helped her. And so instead of just letting it pent up, I just decided to put it in a direction and just use it full force. And now I feel good, and now I'm realizing more and more that I still set out what I wanted to do. I still accomplished my goal. I did find, and I can go on and try to find my birth father, but I don't have to let what happened destroy me. I just have to keep moving and realize I accomplished my goals, and I took the chance, and that's what happened.
And we're not victims.
Right, exactly. You made a choice.
Sandra?
Well, the issue of choice has been fascinating to me throughout this whole conference, and it seems to me that as we struggle to understand the historical circumstances that surround both the sort of shame of infertility and sterility of our adopted parents and how they are able to make their choices to adopt, and the shame of illegitimacy or mental illness or whatever that surrounds issues of our birth parents. What we always come back to, or I should speak from the first person, is that of the members of the triad, we as adoptees had no choices, however narrowly circumscribed, and that our pain comes at this critical time of our human development as infants, and therefore affects our psychology at such an early point. Whereas for these other members, adopted on one hand, or on the other hand, the pain came when they were adults. I feel like I can handle a lot of things as an adult, and I've had some pretty traumatic things happen to me. But the they don't seem, it's out of the problem-solving realm when it happens to you as a kid and you're in this pre-verbal stage and you need love, you need bonding and rejection. You can't ever rewrite that. It seems more primary to me. But one of the things, at least for me, that going through this whole process has accomplished, and I guess I should say by way of explaining that, I know who my birth parents are. They turn out to be married to each other now, and they turn out to be extraordinarily wealthy people who threaten me with a lawsuit if I attempted to contact them again. And so I haven't seen them, I haven't met with them. I've gone back now to being a good adoptee. I might break out of that pattern and attempt to search in another way for some specific information I want. But if there's a gift or a bright side to what the whole going through this process has meant to me, I think it's contributed a lot to my becoming a very political person, because I can take the choicelessness that I feel and look out at the world and see there are all kinds of groups of people out there who have been robbed of choices, either because of race or because of sexual identity or for socioeconomic reasons. So I think that's one of the things that drives me to be this good writer's advocate for those other people who through other social reasons are robbed of choices and are forced to be silent. One of the most crazy things I ever did, and I really didn't quite understand why I did it, but it came, now it's really clear to me, it came shortly after 1985 when I got the real rejection from my birth parents in Connecticut. I got fascinated with Ethiopian famine, and I dropped out of graduate school, went to Sudan, lived in a refugee camp, and ended up spent several years actually ended up writing a book about Ethiopian refugees, and I was incredibly passionate about it. And I'm not sure why, and people ask me why, and I can give all kinds of reasons about, professional reasons why I was interested in terms of biological reasons, since I've read about environmental issues and those sorts. But what's clear to me now is that it was definitely kind of acting out of wanting to talk to refugees who had no choice and had nothing left but these scraps, stories, and faint trails about what happened to them. I was really identifying in a big way with refugees because I felt like a refugee in my own life. Well, at some point, it's good to break out of the victim mode and feel like actually you do have all kinds of choices and understanding to do that. But it is also important when you do that to retain an understanding that there are all kinds of people who are not having anything to do with adoption, who are loved, choiceless, and are voiceless for some other kinds of oppression. And we can use our special understanding as adoptees to see that. I mean, that's a gift.
Yeah, it is.
I think I want to add another angle is from a birth parent's angle. Besides all the different things we think about for the choice of releasing, I think that after we release for adoption, a lot of us go through the bit on, gee, maybe this wasn't the right move for me. I still feel horrible, I miss my child, whatever. But there was a phase I went through, I know, where I tried to assign the guilt. If I had only gotten better communication with my parents, if only the adoption agency that I didn't go through wouldn't have said, well, drive 100 miles and make an appointment when you get here instead of talking to us on the phone for counseling. Or saying, why couldn't my boyfriend do something other than recommend adoption, when he wasn't the father? How about the father in Vietnam, how come he wrote the letter and said adoption? Well, 20 years later, we find out he's wounded and thinks he's dying. All kinds of things. So you try and assign the blame, and you parcel out so much, and then you say, well, what if the person doesn't accept the blame? That doesn't get rid of this feeling of pain. They don't accept it, you can't heal. They aren't taking the responsibility for it. And after a while, you can get yourself into such a focus that, gee, it doesn't matter whether you assign the blame to somebody for influencing you or making the choice or something.
if they're not going to say, I'm sorry, or I wish it could have been, then you're still not healing. Pretty soon you just have to say, well, you know, if I knew enough about them that they made this choice for a certain reason, or because they were totally oblivious that I needed to react or talk in a different way, then you can kind of let go of it sometimes. I think the pain's still there. There's a feeling of unfairness and injustice, but you can't necessarily resolve what already happened in the past. You can only say, you know, now I've learned something, I'm stronger, I can make a better choice, or I realize I have to seek out more information or develop more networks to make myself stronger for choices, or demand things for certain other people, or help change society so that these are viable choices for a person instead of feeling they only have one way. Like you said, you know, if you could talk to somebody to break it down into little pieces, but that structure isn't out there even now for a lot of people. So sometimes you have to let that pain be its own reality, but not let it grow out of proportion or be totally unresolved, or have to have somebody else solve it. Because a lot of times they aren't going to, or they can't.
No, I think of something else in my social work training. They tell us, and rightfully so, that we must be non-judgmental. And I don't want to judge my birth mother. I don't want anybody to judge me. I don't know where the hell I'd stand. And it's hard to feel that truly that one has the right to judge anybody else. I think we just have to accept that they did the best they could at that moment, and let it go at that, and see what we're gonna do now.
I think too, coming back as an adult for a birth mother to be confronted, even now, I think my answers, if my child had found me as an adult or as a child, would have differed a little bit over the years as my memory changes, as certain things become more significant to me as an changed adult than they were at the time I released. You know, at that time, my boyfriend's opinion probably held more weight than anybody's. He's still in my life. He's the father of my second child that I've raised. And, you know, now I'm more detached from him in a lot of ways and see him as separate. But I definitely wasn't emotionally attached, so he had a lot of weight in my life at the time. So many of those changes can lead to what really happened then, and you tell it if you're seeing it differently after 20 years or 30 years than it really happened too. So what the truth is, well, there's factual things, and then there's talk about what you believe were options, why you did it, as you're receiving your priorities. Some of those things weren't too clear then. And by going over them for 20 years, it doesn't necessarily make the truth come out now. Sometimes it's just a different view.
To simplify, a lot of people, I mean, most of us don't know we have choices at certain times in our lives. It's that simple.
It's true.
Think we're inculcated in a certain way of what we should or shouldn't be. I mean, I know now many more things than I didn't know I had a choice to be happy or not to be happy. Or, you know, I really
I think
didn't.
so effectively you don't have a choice.
You don't know you have a choice. I remember someone said to me, well, you had a choice whether you accepted something in your life or not. And I said, well, what do you mean? I didn't really know I had a choice until I saw a therapist, until I began to understand. So that, I think, is very important to help our children understand, our
Yes.
adoptees.
Look, society has such a dim view of adoption and how we all have our different labels about us, and that really becomes a big part of how we relate instead of the truth.
Society wants to see adoption as this
Panacea.
wonderful thing, you know, like I had a newspaper reporter call me and she said to me, I see that you're listed as an adoption specialist, and could you tell me something at your services? And when I started to espouse some of the information that I had gotten from here about what it could be like for an adoptee, the loss, the rejection, the ongoing feelings of worthlessness, oh, she said, this doesn't sound very good. She was like very taken back by this. And she said, well, it doesn't sound like it's, like there's anything good about adoption. And I said, there's a lot of good about it, but you have to really also know that it comes with lots of problems, and parents need to be educated if they're going to take another human being into their lives. Well, she wrote the article very well. Therapist discusses adoption, she said, and she said adoption can be wonderful. She couldn't present it as it's a problem. And then she brought up, some of the issues, the identity issues. But the public doesn't want to see it that way.
At least you said can be instead of.
Yeah.
Three years ago, our mayor in New York at that time, Koch, his book came out called Mayor. And I was sitting watching the evening news, and they were reviewing the book. So they picked one quote from the book. Now, he doesn't have anything to do with adoption, right? The quote is as follows. The mayor says, quote, I run my political campaigns with the humility of an adopted child. And my phone started to ring off the hook. I was angry. People were angry. So I called the next morning and spoke to the press secretary. And he said to me, did you read the book? I mean, it just came out, right? I said, no. He said, you people never do. And I can't even stand that you people thing, So I said, but I'm missing something. Is the mayor adopted? No. But he's Jewish. And when he started in politics, he was an outcast, so he knows what it's like to be adopted. And isn't that society's view? I mean, isn't that statement really what the general public thinks about adoption? About adoptees? We have a different kind of A on our head than birth mothers do, but we get our label. And in New York, the records were sealed to protect adoptive families from blackmail. And doesn't that make it be bad? If it's something okay, then how can you be blackmailed? I mean, it's outrageous stuff. And I see our job really as educational. As a good part of what we have to do is educate the public, educate other birth mothers, other adoptive parents, other adoptees, and the mental health professionals, and the legislators.
One of the things I had said to this reporter was that education can help can prevent the dream from becoming a nightmare. Oh, she didn't like that at all. It was like, wow. So she rewrote it in a more gentle fashion.
We talked about strength, so does anyone in the room feel strong enough to walk to Washington with me in June? With the rest of us that are walking? How does that grab you?
How long will it take?
all the way?
How long will it take?
Well, it's 19 days from New York City. It's 19 days from New York City to Washington, with 2 days off are counted in there. And we have people that are going to walk the whole thing. I walked it last year. I walked the whole thing with there were 9 of us, 4 adoptees and 5 birth mothers. And it took us 18 days. We're adding a day. And I'm doing it again. It was the most exhilarating thing I ever did in my life. You can walk 1 day, or 2 days, or 3 days, or an hour. You can meet us in Philly. You can meet us in Baltimore.
Will everyone arrive at the same time?
Yes, everyone will arrive at the same
How does
time.
it work, Joe?
We walk 15 miles a day, and we're followed at 3 miles an hour is how fast we walk, which is pretty comfortable rate of speed. And we're followed by a 23-foot mobile home that is directly behind us. And in fact, if you want to go to the bathroom or you want to lie down, you don't feel good, or you want some food from the refrigerator in the RV, you just move off to the side of the road and stand still. And as the van comes by, you just step up into the van and go lie down or go to the bathroom, whatever you want to do, and come back out when you want. So it's not this is not a grueling task, and none of us were in shape last year. I mean, I walked a couple miles a day in preparation for a while, and then I got so busy with the press releases I never walked again for the last month. We have a forced break every 45 minutes for liquid, so that we don't dehydrate. We eat 5 meals a day. We have a snack breakfast at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then a big breakfast after we walk for an hour, and then we have a small lunch and a big lunch after we stop. We stay in motels that have pools, so we swim all afternoon, relax, and we have a good meal every evening, go to sleep early and get up at 5:30. So we can beat the most of the heat of the day. And
How
we
is it
walk.
supported?
We each support ourselves. We have, the band was donated by one group, and the gas money's been donated, and we have a fund. We have to pay for ourselves to go.
In other words, if I want to walk, what do I
It's going to
contribute
cost you
other than what I
$1,000.
can?
You only pay for yourself. But
Costs
that's,
how much?
the whole walk is about $1,000.
I need to pay $1,000 to walk.
Well, last year we called it the March to Heal, and it was very self-healing. I mean, it was the most incredible emotional, psychological experience I've ever had. It was a bond that we were like this. We were one body with 18 legs and 18 arms and 9 mouths that was symbiotic. We were one focused little survival animal that just happened to break up into a part at night to go to sleep or to go to the bathroom, because we couldn't manage all of these things together. But and this it's really tough. And we're walking in chains this year, by the way. We're going to chain ourselves up. Well, it's symbolic, but we bought fixture chain. The thing that holds fixtures from the ceiling, and cut it into pieces, so each of us has a loop around our waist and a doggy chain to snap onto this long one. So that for the press, symbolically, we will be chained together. And
Is it for the press?
we're doing this for,
press coverage?
we did last year, and I expect we will again. We go through on the back roads mostly, and all the small towns will put something in their newspapers, and we have ceremonies in New York and Philly and Trenton and Baltimore and Washington. We'll get the press. If we did last year, we'll get it more this year.
And that's your purpose, isn't it?
No, the purpose is twofold. Well, no, it's not. It's all educational. We want to get the press because that's the way the public finds out that the problems that exist. We can't educate without the media, and it's public exposure for the movement. There will be people who are adoptees and birth parents and adoptive parents that didn't know there were groups out there, didn't know that there was search help available. When we get to Washington, we're making appointments with our U.S. senators.
Were you ever met with adversity?
Not last year. And we walked through the slums of Trenton and Philly. No, we had no adversity at all. We were never heckled. People gave us thumbs up signs. We had a sign on the van that said "Honk for Adoptees' Rights," and people were honking. Everybody knew who we were. There was so much media. We go into a restaurant, and it's you guys. Every hotel, without exception, gave us an extra discount because we said, we had reservations, and it was at a guaranteed rate. They said $59, and I'd go in to check us in, and I'd say, could you make that be 50? Why? You have a rate. I said, but I walked here for these people from New York. You what? You walked here? What do you mean you walked here? I said, look at our shirts. They invariably gave us a discount. They'd take off $9 or $5. They'd give us the cheapest rate they could. It was a very positive experience. And I really, even if you could just come to New York for the kickoff, or just come to Philly, or just come to Washington at the end, which is probably the most important.
Why are you going to New York and Washington? Is that just symbolic?
We did it last year, and it worked, and it's just the March for Civil Rights and Adoption, and people march on Washington, and I live in New York, and we have 66 groups in this country are supporting the march. 66 groups from 40 states and actually 4 countries. And that is where all the media is in this country.
New York to Washington for obvious reasons. Plus, it's not that far and it's not that short. It's just about the right distance.
It's something that we wanted to do, something that would get attention from the media. If we just started in College Park, Maryland, and walked for one day, which we could do, and it would get us right to the Senate office building, we'd get nothing. The fact that we were walking got us press last year.
I'm in the West. I didn't know all this stuff.
Oh, there's March brochures out on the table by the registration area. There are brochures describing the route and our schedule. David, you were going to say something?
Yeah, last year I didn't march, but I was there at New York for the kickoff and Philadelphia, and then the final leg into Washington to Lincoln Memorial last year we went to, and I didn't march the whole time. I was just there, but it was a very positive experience, and I was happy that I was able to lend support to the marchers. And also the media definitely was out between New York and Philadelphia. It was always fun coming back and watching the media coverage the evening after.
We watched ourselves on TV almost every night, and that was fun.
But that was fun.
Also, what?
Here in New York, I never saw one.
Channel 13, the public broadcasting station, gave us a very good. New York is tough. New York is a very tough place. But Philly and Baltimore gave us exceptional coverage, and Washington was okay.
You do a lot less
and
than
there was-
coverage in New York.
Hmm?
You do a lot less
We
than what you
could-
did
yeah.
in coverage.
This-
I did see some in the Daily News, I think.
We had pieces of it.
Pictures, I saw pictures.
Articles.
It just wasn't what we wanted, but it was still. But look, the phone is still. We still get phone calls from last year's march, from people who found out. People met us along the way. Young truck driver stopped and said, "What? You know, I heard about you guys. I'm adopted." This kind of thing. And the fascinating thing to me is that every press piece that I saw, it wasn't adopted adults marching to Washington for their rights. It was adopted kids searching for their parents. Kids, always kids. There was nobody under 40. I mean, you know.
I always get like,
No, we were four adoptees, 4 birth parents, the main marchers, and a 12-year-old daughter of one of the marchers who was a birth mother. And I was the only man, which was, let me tell you, it was a wonderful experience, but it was a fascinating experience to be, because it was,
So you had roughly 10, 12?
what they used to do is they used to look at me and they'd say, "Joe, behave." But it was a group of love. I mean, that's the only way to describe it. We just loved each other.
I find that New York presents this kind of a group almost like a little bit of a crazy group, you know, that the papers kind of, they don't present them as,
The New York Union, the New York Press.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
you know, they're like, really, yeah, kind of.
We who search, I mean, somebody from them said it on Sally Jesse Raphael 2 months ago. We're unbalanced. We're mentally unbalanced if we search, and there's only 1 to 2% of us anyhow.
And only the very unhappy, problematic search, only the real crazy
Yeah,
search.
right. Well, so what do you?
Normal, ordinary adoptee was just search.
I have a problem here. No, I'm having a problem here with this. I'd like to get, can we get back to the topic?
Sure. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, so I came here, I'm working on my search, I'm an adoptee, and I'm working on my search. And this says, why couldn't my birth mother keep me? And I think I came here looking for answers to why did she not keep me? And it's turned into a conversation of, why did she give me away? And I'm realizing that I'm looking for the answer to, please tell me, please somebody tell me what happened. And instead, it's triggering all these feelings in me that I know why she did it. It was the only way she could have an abortion.
Is there any birth mothers in the room that might respond?
It was her.
I
No,
want to
I
hear
want-
from some. What?
Okay. It was, and I'm still in hiding because I think I know who and where she is, except she's dead. But I have been hiding all my adult life for fear that she'd find out that that I didn't die, that I'm still alive, and that I'm going to shame her and her family. So I want to know, why couldn't she keep me that will allow me to resolve the feelings that she was trying to abort me?
Well, do you?
I want to. Well,
share with
wait,
us?
Mark. I want to have one of the birth mothers respond. You've already spoken, so if you want to try.
You feel that she,
That was the only form of abortion in 1942, was adoption. That was the only way she could to cover up her pregnancy and get on with her life and pretend that it never happened, was for somebody else to take me, change my name, and act like that's where I've always been.
Well, in the first place, she probably could have gotten an illegal abortion if she really wanted to abort you. I mean, I strongly doubt, as a matter of fact, I bet my life on it, that she didn't want to abort you because you're here. And if someone really wanted to get an abortion, you can get one.
I think I picked that up from my adoptive parents, that it was an illegitimate pregnancy and that was the only solution, and this was just such a shameful thing, and that there wasn't the other choice then.
You know, I've been wanting to say something this whole time, but I'm really hesitant because I almost felt like an intruder because I'm a birth mother. But I wanted to hear.
You're hardly an intruder in adoption, you know?
I know, but I really like to hear from adoptees. And I always feel sadness when your adoptees talk because a lot of the things I hear from them are exactly what I thought my daughter would feel all those years. And it's not hard for me to understand. I mean, it's so complicated even to me, you know, to try to tell you why I should give you up. Unless I gave up my daughter in 1967, and I don't see any difference in 1940, 50, or any of the other years people talk about. I mean, you can't imagine the kind of pressure. I mean, people treated me like I was a slut. And I don't want to seem like a victim, because that's my name on the signature. But it went through months and months and months of pressure from people. I mean, I had to hide out. I mean, I was in a locked apartment with my sister and brother-in-law, who I'm very close to, because they didn't know how to handle it. And I didn't sign any papers for 2.5 months because they kept trying to figure out a way to keep her. You know, you have all this stuff that people saying, what can you offer her? You're a single person, you have no money, there's 2 loving parents out here. And I had a fairly good mother and father. I think it always seemed important to me to have that unit. And I never felt like it was, from the day I signed the papers, I knew it was wrong for me, but I kept trying to pretend it was good for her. I don't even know if any of that answers any of your questions, but I can tell you that if she wanted an abortion, I'm sure she could have had an abortion, because I could have had an illegal abortion, but I felt like it was wrong. I thought it was so wrong to even have had sex with somebody who'd gone out with for 6 months, and it happened one time, I got pregnant, and then he dumped me. You know, and it took me 2 or 3 years even to, I mean, I couldn't, a week before he'd asked me to get married, and I said, no, I wanted to know him longer. And then he dumped me. And for 2 or 3 years, I couldn't even understand. I think in the back of my mind, I still thought he was coming back. But I mean, that's minor compared to losing my daughter. My life stopped, you know, and I don't like to sound like a victim. But one of the reasons I want to hear adoptees is because I hope that if I ever am fortunate enough to meet her, I hope that somehow I can make her understand what it was like. And it had nothing to do with trying to reject her. I just hate that adoptees have to feel rejected. I mean, you have no idea what it's like. I mean, I can understand that feeling though, too.
I've heard so many birth mothers say, my life stood still. The moment I surrendered, my life stopped. Tears me apart. I know it's true. I mean, I keep hearing it, but it's like every time you hear it, it still hurts. You know, we can hurt for you too. I want to tell you.
I'll tell you something though. I wish that I had known someone like you back then. If social workers like you did not exist. They did not exist. It's the truth.
They don't exist now.
Well, that's not so. There are some.
They
There
do
are
exist
some.
because he's sitting there, you know. But they're few and far between.
Yeah, but I'm an adoptee social worker. That's different.
No, it's not different. You're human.
Sorry, I don't have anything.
Sarah.
To address your problems, there was a lot of pressure. Incredible. Miss Sarah. and
Wait,
then-
1 second. I want to. You all right?
I'm adoptee searching. I haven't found them, so I can't really say. But I was born in the era that you were born in, post-war baby boom, World War II. They did not have, and I tend to sometimes I have to separate for myself present day and 1940s, and I think it was even worse the further back you go. But you were in a war era. Parents were very much against women who got pregnant out of wedlock. They did not offer them any choices. There was no counseling, there was nothing to help them, there was no reach out programs. Now we see so many of the birth mothers, much larger percentage are able to keep their children. And back then, they were given absolutely almost no help to do any of that, no matter how much they wanted to keep their child.
And my adoptive parents made it even worse by telling me that I was the chosen baby and this woman loved me. She loved me so much that she did this to me.
Just trying to be nice.
So that makes it even harder that if this is what happens when somebody loves you, then watch out.
Nurse?
Yeah, I'm a birth mother and I surrendered in 1969. All that time ago. But at that time, I didn't know anyone else who was a single parent. And I didn't know anyone who could surrender a child, but I knew they were out there. I didn't have the self-confidence to keep my child. And I was ashamed and kept it a secret from my own parents. I cried for 4 days in the hospital after the infection.
Sometimes too, you know, even when we decide it's not because the child isn't worthy, we don't love them. You know, I did get to see my daughter unlike a lot of people, and, you know, I felt it was important to see her son to the person that was born. And I got to do some of those things in the hospital. That's particularly honored to Elizabeth Beans. And there's no name on the certificate, but she had a name. I had both. And I think a lot of mothers I've talked to are going to don't believe all the papers you see because there's more of your story.
I tell people in my group all the time, because they come in and they tell me about the things that their fantasies about their birth parents, and or the stories they've been told by their adoptive parents, or the stories they've been told by the agency. And I say, don't you believe one goddamn word until you hear it from her, and then you can believe what she tells you, because there's so many lies, and we walk around and we carry that inside us. And people have done, I mean, I know a young man who was told that he was found in a garbage can, and he believed it. And he had a rage because his parents told him, that's where you came from. He said, they wouldn't lie to me, that must have been where I was found. How could my mother do that to me? And he was no more found in a garbage can than anybody else in this room. He went through an agency adoption, and this is what they decided to tell him for his own good. We can't afford to do it to ourselves, to believe anything but the truth from the source, I think. Who, you had your, yeah.
I had the opportunity to meet my daughter last year, and when we met, she gave me a copy of the not identifying information that had been supplied to her from the agency, and she let me read it, and it was a shock to me what they put down. They slandered me in the worst possible light that they could. It was sickening, it really was. If any of you adoptees get non-identifying information, don't believe everything that's written on here, because they're packed with lies. Let me tell you. I'm glad I got to read hers, because it lies.
Sandra?
This whole idea of opening the records, I'm not sure how much, in that narrow sense of the word, opening the record is going to mean, given that, especially for those who born in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and records are full of deceit. Incredible deceit. In my interviews with birth mothers, I found several who told me that they were so frightened that their child would not be adopted from a good family, and they wouldn't be considered one of the best adoptable kids. That they wouldn't tell health problems in the family. They wouldn't say anything bad, and they would just make up stories to make the child seem as best as possible. So even if we fought to get those records open so that I could go and look and see what the baby fold wrote about my parents and my history, I'm not going to find out. I can't believe any of that, until I get back to the source. And this whole, I think I know what you're struggling with, but you can't be torn apart by your own fantasies or anybody else's fantasies.
Yeah, I feel like I'm running around protecting them from the knowledge that I'm alive.
Right, that you're on the planet.
Yeah, that I'm here.
Do you belong to Sepulchre?
lady who was adopted, born in '44 in Texas, and she had said there was such a huge black market adoption, there'd be no way for her to find a reunion. And they literally changed dates, months, names, everything, and later destroyed records.
I'm a product of one of those. I mean, I know what that is, and to have all your records be just worth garbage. I mean, literally, it's vile. But
And it was the agency, it wasn't the mother.
But at least if they're open, we'll deal with it. We'll find it out, and we'll deal with the whatever truth we can find. But black market babies who have to search for 8 years to get the information that's false. I'd rather get the false information in 6 months, and then I'll have the 8 years to deal with the trauma instead of waiting another 8. You know.
You have to take as much business out of adoption as you can to make it better, because it evolved as a large part of business, a service, yes, but it's also a business. You're involved with business, you're involved with money and profit.
Oh, it's true.
It's terrible.
I want to make a suggestion for those of you who want it. There is another support group right now after this. It's supposed to be in Atlanta unless they move this like they did last night. But I think maybe we could all use a piece of it, or many of us could use a piece of it. I know I feel like I can. And I know that Penny's a good group leader. She's an adoptee social worker, and she's neat. And I invite you to join me and go in, and maybe we can work on some more of this in a different way.
Thanks. Thanks
Okay.
for letting me bring that up.
Joe, how many people are signed up for the walk?
The walk? We have about 10 full-time.